Okay, so if you clicked on this video, you already know we need to talk about this upcoming Miraculous Ladybug Season 6 episode called A Fairy Good Night, because there is a lot to unpack here. And honestly, some of these theories are kind of wild. So stick around, because by the end of this, I think you're going to look at this episode completely differently. Now, before we get into everything, let me just read you the official synopsis real quick, so we're all on the same page here. Max's mom is about to leave for a space mission, and when Marinette hears the news, she comes up with an idea to help Max cope with the separation. Okay, so on the surface, that sounds pretty straightforward, right? But trust me, there is way more going on underneath that than you'd think. Let's start with the title, because the title alone is doing a lot of heavy lifting. In English, it's A Fairy Good Night, which is obviously a play on words, like a very good night, but with fairy instead. And then in French, the title translates to something like The Fairy of Beautiful Dreams, which honestly, when that first dropped, a lot of people were getting major Sandboy vibes from it. Remember Sandboy, the whole nightmare episode that was kind of creepy? Yeah, that energy. But here's the thing. Now that we've actually seen the trailer and the synopsis, it doesn't really seem like it's going in a Sandboy direction at all. The English title seems to be telling us that this Akuma situation is going to happen at night, which lines up with what we see in the trailer, and the French title mentions dreams, and most people dream at night, so that part checks out pretty easily. But the fairy part, now that is what's been throwing me off, and I think it should be throwing you off too. Look, we all know what a fairy is, right? Tiny little person with wings, very classic, very magical. And the way fairies are usually shown in cartoons and movies is like kind and helpful and sweet. But if you actually go back and look at fairy folklore, sometimes fairies were good, yeah, but sometimes they were also genuinely terrifying and evil. So the big question becomes, is the fairy in this title supposed to be good or evil? If it's connected to an Akuma, you'd think evil, right? But here's the thing. This season has been doing something really interesting where a lot of the Akuma villains aren't straight up bad. Like think about Sublimation, where the Akuma was kind of trying to help people, not hurt them. Same thing with Reckless Driver. So this season has been blurring that line, and it makes the fairy angle even harder to pin down. Now, does the fairy in the title refer to Claudia's Akuma form? Because the episode titles this season usually do connect to the Akuma. I think the only real exception we've had so far is the episode No Way. So yeah, I do think it's likely that Claudia becomes the fairy, but how that would actually work, I'm not totally sure. And actually, okay, here's where it gets interesting. We haven't seen Claudia in the trailer as the Akuma, and normally in these Season 6 trailers, we do see the Akuma victim. But think about this. If we take the fairy thing literally, and she becomes tiny, like fairy-sized, how on earth are Ladybug and Cat Noir supposed to find and destroy the Akuma? Unless, and this is a big unless, she frees herself. We've seen other characters throughout the show manage to de-akumatize themselves, and maybe Max helps her do it. And I mean Max, not Pegasus, just Max as himself, talking to his mom, which would honestly be such a powerful emotional moment. Okay, so now we gotta ask, why would Claudia even get akumatized in the first place? And yeah, I know, I'm assuming she's the one who gets akumatized. We don't see it confirmed anywhere, but considering this whole episode is set around her going to space and she's literally an astronaut, it just makes sense. Now, there are these Moon Warrior characters we see in the trailer, and some people think they might be the Akuma victims, but I honestly don't think so. I think they're more like the shark guards from Sleeping Siren, just part of the Akuma's power, not actual people who got transformed. They're just minions, basically. So with that in mind, I've got a few different ideas for why Claudia gets akumatized. The first one has to do with Tomei. We know that Lila and Tomei are working together this season, they're allies, and Ladybug and Cat Noir would be way more vulnerable in space. So similar to how Tomei let Gabriel use the system to compromise Ada back in Intuition, they could pull something like that again, have Tomei mess with the space station or the shuttle somehow, and push Claudia over the edge. But they've kind of already done that storyline before, so I'm not sure they'd repeat it. The second idea, and honestly, this one hits harder emotionally, is that Claudia is just missing Max. Think about it. She's about to go on this huge space mission. She's going to be gone for who knows how long, and she's leaving her son behind. And Max, being Max, he probably wouldn't tell his mom how upset he is about it because he wouldn't want to stress her out while she's in such a high-pressure environment. So he keeps it to himself. But what if someone else tells her? What if Tomei reaches out and says something to mess with her head? Or even more interesting, what if it's Agley? There's a scene in the trailer where Agley looks like she's talking to Max, and a lot of people, myself included, think Agley might actually be Lila in disguise. And Max looks genuinely upset in that moment. So maybe Agley manipulates Max into expressing how he really feels about his mom leaving, and that information somehow gets back to Claudia and breaks her hard enough for the Akuma to take hold. And if Claudia does get akumatized because she's missing her son, then maybe those moon warriors we see in the trailer are sent to go get Max and bring him to the moon, which is kind of sweet in a twisted villain way, but also logistically, they're on the moon and Max is on Earth, so I don't know how well that plan would work out. The third idea, and honestly, this one is one of my favorites, is that it's Tomei again. But this time, instead of playing the emotional angle, Tomei suggests doing something awful to the moon itself, like building another oxygen tower up there or some equally terrible environmental destruction plan. And Claudia, who is an astronaut who clearly cares about space and science, would be absolutely outraged by that. She gets akumatized out of anger, and the moon warriors exist to protect the moon from being exploited. I kind of like that angle, honestly. It gives the villain some moral weight. But okay, here's a question that has been bugging me and probably should be bugging you too. How does the Akuma, butterfly, even get to space? Like, butterflies can't survive in space, right? There's no air, there's no atmosphere. And if you remember back in Intuition, when Ada got akumatized, Gabriel used a voyage portal to send the butterfly directly into the spaceship so it could survive in that environment. But Lila doesn't have the Horse Miraculous. She doesn't have that teleportation power. And I would also assume she doesn't have the space power-ups either. Gabriel didn't really know how to use the power-ups himself, even though he knew they existed. And since Lila only really knew what Gabriel knew, I'm guessing she doesn't have access to them either. So my best guess is that the butterfly was planted in the shuttle before it even launched. Like, Lila and Tomei planned ahead and hid the Akuma in the ship, ready to activate whenever Claudia was emotionally vulnerable. That would actually be pretty smart and pretty sinister. But wait, there's another problem. Distance. Remember in Star Train, Gabriel really struggled to communicate with Claudia because she was so far away, like halfway to the moon. The connection was barely holding up. So how would Lila be able to talk to Claudia through the Akuma from all the way back on Earth? I don't think the usual method of psychic Akuma communication would work at that range. So again, I think Tomei comes in here. Maybe Lila uses Tomei's technology to communicate with Claudia, like an astronaut talking to mission control. That could work. But even if it does work, there's another interesting possibility, which is that maybe there's no Amok this episode. If the communication between Chrysalis and the Akuma villain is already sketchy because of the distance, then maintaining a senti-monster on top of that might just not be possible. That would actually make this episode pretty unique for the season. All right, now let's talk about something else I noticed in the trailer that I think a lot of people glossed over. Where is Max living? Because there are scenes that seem to show Max inside Marinette's building, and I always thought Marinette's parents owned like their section of the building, right? Like the bakery and then their living space upstairs. But apparently there are other doors in that building that just aren't locked, which is kind of hilarious, honestly. Like, you're telling me Tom and Sabine just leave their kitchen open for anyone in the building to walk into? Okay, sure. But jokes aside, I think what's actually happening is that Max might be staying with the Dupain-Chang family while his mom is away on the mission. Tom and Sabine are probably letting him crash in a spare room, which is honestly so wholesome and so on brand for them. But I also think the episode starts at Max's actual home. We've only really seen his bedroom once before, and that was way back in Daddy Cop when he was playing chess with Markov. And the color scheme of that room, it's not an exact match, but it does line up pretty closely with what we see in the trailer. So I think he starts the episode at his own place and then eventually moves in with Marinette's family for the duration of the mission. And honestly, I love the Dupain Changs. They're an amazing family. But like, Adrian literally has a full mansion with like 1 billion empty rooms. Max could have his own wing over there. Just saying. Now here's the part that I think could make this episode truly special. The synopsis says Marinette comes up with an idea to help Max cope. And I've been thinking what that could be. Knowing Marinette, she's probably going to make something handmade for them. She's always crafting things for people, right? So maybe she makes matching hearts out of fabric. One for Max and one for Claudia, like a you carry this and I'll be with you kind of deal. That's very Marinette energy. Or, and look, I'm only half joking here, maybe Marinette's plan is slightly more unhinged. Like maybe she genuinely considers just kidnapping Claudia to keep her from weaving, which honestly would also be very Marinette energy. She always has the best intentions, even when her methods are absolutely chaotic. But here's what I really hope happens by the end of this episode. I really hope Ladybug offers Pegasus the space power-up. Like genuinely offers it to him and says you can go visit your mom in space whenever you want. And maybe even Max reveals his identity to Claudia so she knows her son can literally teleport to see her anytime. Think about how beautiful that would be. Felix and Kagami got to use space power-ups just to kiss each other above the English Channel. Like, come on. Max's mom is literally in space on a mission and he can't go see her? Give this boy the power-up. Let him visit his mom. That would be so incredibly sweet, and it would stop both of them from worrying about each other. And honestly, Max deserves it. He has been the absolute backbone of the Miraculous team this entire season. They could not have done half of what they've accomplished without Pegasus. He has been overworked and underpaid all season long, and I really hope this episode gives him the spotlight he earned. So look, we don't have an exact air date locked in yet, and it might not come for a little while, but knowing how unpredictable the release schedule has been this season, it could honestly drop sooner than we think. Either way, I am genuinely excited for this one because it has all the ingredients for a really emotional, really fun episode, and I cannot wait to see how it plays out. Let me know down in the comments what you think is going to happen. Do you think Claudia gets akumatized? Do you think Max reveals his identity to his mom? And do you think Agley is actually Lila? Because I definitely do. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.